Welcome to the Karnjanaprakorn Show. I'm an entrepreneur, a podcaster, YouTuber, investor, collector, runner, partner, and parent. Most people know me as the founder of Skillshare. As I approached my 40th birthday, I found myself at a crossroads. So I embarked on a year-long sabbatical to rediscover what makes life truly fulfilling. This podcast is a personal journey to explore how we can thrive in all aspects of life, from work and family to relationships, hobbies, and beyond. In each episode, I'll explore novel ideas that challenge our own perspectives. Whether you're seeking inspiration, practical advice, or just curious, join me on this journey, and welcome to the show.
People are building quote unquote calm businesses now, where they focus more around their life, their mental health, and the businesses form around them. But then with the personal holdco, it's definitely more centered around like what you want to do, your health, your lifestyle, and then you build these businesses around what you enjoy doing.
This is Yong-Soo Chung. He's an entrepreneur that is building a personal holding company, something I'm pretty interested in doing myself. He has bootstrapped 3 different e-commerce businesses that generate over 7 figures in revenue. I brought him on the podcast to talk about building both your business and your audience, and his playbook on how anyone could build a personal holding company as a solopreneur or a creator. So here we go.
The way I look at this is everyone has interests, everyone has hobbies, and effectively, people have many hobbies, many interests. And I think the core philosophy of a PHC is that you get to pursue those hobbies and turn them into businesses. And so now we're living in an age of AI technology. And so before, when, 10, 15 years ago, when the term lifestyle business was really a thing, you really just pursued one thing because you didn't have all those tools to build all of these things. But now there's so many no-code tools, so many things where one person can go really far without having to incur a lot of overhead with labor or whatever. And so I think it's really possible to have many of these lifestyle businesses just center around yourself, what you're interested in, and you effectively become the distribution mechanism for all of these because people will resonate with your message, like get to know who you are, and then you just talk about your life. Hey, I'm doing this. I love biking. And so I created a biking business, or I love drinking coffee. And so I have a coffee business. If you come from that authentic angle of just being yourself with these hobbies and you become the distribution mechanism for these products, that is a really different way of looking at it than when we were graduating from college. We were always taught like, hey, you should find a solution for a problem and then just maniacally focus on that. And then you end up with a startup that's like, you're solving this problem and you're not really even that passionate about it. You're just doing the work for it. And then hopefully you get an exit in the future. It's a very different way of looking at things.
Okay, that's super interesting. Who wouldn't want to build a business around their interests and passions? These quote unquote lifestyle businesses used to be looked down upon because they never reach venture scale, aka billion-dollar outcome. But if you want to play a different game, a game in where you can thrive in all areas of life, then this could be an interesting path to take. You can still be wildly successful, you can make a lot of money, and you can have fun doing it. So I asked Yong-Soo to share his playbook on how anyone could do it themselves.
I don't know, it wasn't sexy, I guess, to build businesses around your hobbies. Honestly, like VCs and other people would look down on people. That's a lifestyle business. Yeah. Don't invest in that as a lifestyle business. It was looked down upon when startups were really sexy and everyone was trying to build. But now I think the narrative is shifting, obviously, with the economy the way it is. A lot of startups are starting to feel the cash crunch. And so people are shifting now to more cash flowing businesses. And people really have started to put more weight into lifestyle and also mental health. We're shifting into more of this, people are building quote unquote calm businesses now, where they focus more around their life, their mental health, and the businesses kind of form around them. So basically it's more about prioritization. When you do a VC funded startup, your goal is to make as much money as possible and your health goes down, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Like no one cares. Like you have to make this thing successful, right? But then with the personal holdco, I think it's definitely more centered around like what you want to do, your health, your lifestyle, and then you build these businesses around what you enjoy doing. And so in my opinion, the exact opposite of a VC funded startup mentality. And I think we're entering into the stage now where we're going to see a lot more people. I mean, we're already seeing it with a lot of creators. If you look at a successful author or just a creator that has a big audience, like they can literally just spin up businesses and they already have distribution for whatever they want. When you boil it down, it really is like their own brand being the distribution for all these interests, or not even interests, but sometimes just things that they're passionate about. And so I think that we are moving into an era where you don't have to have millions of followers. Like you don't have to have that distribution to really start thinking about this and like methodically build out your own personal holdco. I think that's like really not only exciting, but I really think that's a much better path for most people, 99% of people trying to enjoy their life, but also make a living essentially.
I couldn't agree more. Work is just one bucket in your life that has meaning. For me, working on something meaningful is pretty important, but not at the expense of other areas. And for most people that don't want to have a 1 in a million shot of building $1 billion company, this is a pretty sensible path. And I think that's the key point here. You can build or buy multiple businesses around interests, passions, or none of the above. This is an alternative path that many of us can take. But you don't necessarily have to build an audience to take this route, but it is beneficial. So if you build an audience around your interests and your passions, then how does that translate to the businesses? Could you just skip the audience building part and go straight to building an audience for the company instead? I then asked Yong-Soo's thoughts on distribution and how building a personal brand can positively impact the businesses that you run.
Yeah, you can do either route. And I actually, with the businesses that I've built, so I have an e-commerce business, I have 2 e-commerce business and a 3PL, but, and then I have a podcast and newsletter, right? And so what's funny is when I first launched the podcast and newsletter, which is about a year old, I thought that I could essentially kind of launch with a bang because I already had these audiences from my businesses, but like nobody cared. Honestly, it was really surprising to me. And that's because I didn't have a personal brand myself. Like no one knows who I am, and no one cared about the content that I was posting, which is about business and whatever. I think that we had an era, maybe, 10 years ago, where businesses could build an authentic voice and brand online, and it wasn't as difficult. Now, I think because there's so many brands and it's harder to build, people are so skeptical about brands now that it's shifting now to more of a personal brand being more powerful than the company brand. And so I think it's just a trend that's happening now. And so when we were building businesses, company building was it was more powerful and more effective. But now I think it's shifting. And so I think we're kind of going into this new era where people's trust is really what people are looking for. Because, trust with a specific person is way more powerful than a trust with a brand. Because it just feels a little bit like you can't really trust any brand. I think it's like a little bit of a hybrid model. Yeah. And so I think you can start with your audience and start with your own personal brand, because it'll just make doing things easier in the future for whatever endeavor you want to launch or project you want to launch. But then at a certain point, that brand has to take on an identity of its own. It's got to live beyond you. And this is actually one of the things like if you're planning to sell one of your brands, like you can't be tied to that brand or else your valuation is going to go be low and all that stuff. So like you have to at some point detach yourself from that brand, which is like interesting because you're the distribution mechanism for your brands. But then at a certain point, you need the brands to be self-sufficient, to be on their own. And so, I've never thought about this actually until now, but it's almost like your personal brand is like the seeds to all these projects. And then once they grow into their own, whatever they become, then at that point, they need to have their own identities. You should kind of step aside and let these companies run on their own. So I actually never thought about it that way, but I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah. This is good to hear because this is the strategy that I'm executing right now. I decided to build an audience first by focusing on long form content, starting with this podcast and this YouTube. Then I plan on writing articles for my newsletter and see where it goes from there. I don't really have any business ideas today, but I thought it would be good for me to build an audience around what I'm exploring and what I'm interested in. So based on this idea, Yong-Soo shared a framework that he uses in how he distinguishes between building a personal brand and a company brand.
I'll add one more thing here. I guess it could be a framework the way I look at it, but I always ask myself, like, is this like the goose and the egg thing? So like, for example, personal brand and content for me is like the golden goose. And so what I mean by that is like, it can spin off a lot of projects, like lay these eggs, but then it doesn't actually have a lot of inherent value. Like I can't really sell my podcast or new, you know what I mean? Like it's me. I can't sell my social media brand. Like how can I sell my social media brand? So the way I see it is like, is this a golden goose that lays these golden eggs, right? Or is it an egg? So like when you build these brands, like they become these eggs that hatch and then they become their own things. But then the goose itself doesn't have a lot of. You want to keep holding on to the thing that will get these other eggs, but then they may not even have value. It's the eggs that will hatch and then and grow into other larger things that will have the value.
So tied to this, I think there's a new trend where the niche for a creator is tied to all of their interests, which overlaps really well for building a personal holding company. But how can one build their personal brand that's authentic to all the different things they're interested in and build an audience around that? So for example, I'm interested in building companies around this personal holding company model. I'm also really interested in running right now. I collect a lot of sports cards. I'm practicing mixed martial arts. I'm exploring longevity and optimizing my health. These are all different areas I'm exploring, but it could come off as random or all over the place if you haven't really followed my channel for too long. So I asked him his thoughts on how a creator could build a personal brand around all their interests. And here's his answer.
As long as your authentic self is being portrayed online and you have core values that you imbue into each area of your life, there's like an underlying theme that ties everything together, then I still think it's relevant. And I still think people will, they'll follow you because they're interested in you and what you have to say versus, I mean, it's a balancing act because, let's say I'm just doom scrolling and I find some really interesting business content. I've never heard of anybody of this influencer or whatever, but it's interesting content. And then I'll be like, oh, I'm going to look at more of his stuff. But like, it's the first interaction. And so of course it has to be very practical and very catchy. But then after a while, I might be like, oh, this person's content is really good. So I'm going to follow this person. And then I build a relationship with that person. Right. So when you're creating content, it has to serve either the purpose of like discoverability, where there's a potential to get a lot of eyeballs, like virality, but that kind of stuff is not going to be, it's not going to be your deep personal stuff. But then the other piece of content you write is like more about yourself and more about your philosophy and your values. And that's going to be really, really like building trust, building, authenticity with your current base. And I feel like as long as you gotta do both, because if you only do one or the other, like it's, you either get a lot of like followers that have no idea who you really are. They're just, on the surface level, or you either have a very small audience, but they really know you. I mean, this is the whole 1,000 true fans concept, but I mean, you may have 1,000 true fans, but then it may just not grow from there. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a balancing act of the two. Yeah, I mean, I think the audience building thing is a core piece of what I'm doing next, and so I'm constantly thinking about that. For me, I would be more on the side of the 1,000 true fans versus trying to grow a massive audience that barely know who I am. And so you got to do both, but I'm kind of more trying to build that core base that's like really interested in what I'm doing.
So switching topics, I asked Yong-Soo to share what trends he was excited about in the space. So if he were to recommend some different categories or areas for someone to build a company in, what would those areas be? What are the trends that he's excited about? Where does he think the future is going? Here's him outlining 3 different areas that he's currently excited about.
Yeah. I think there's a few different trends happening here. The first is obviously like with AI technology coming, that's going to open up doors that we don't even know exist right now. And so, I mean, I don't even know like how the AI landscape will look in 6 months, a year. And I know AI is really overplayed, so we don't have to like go too deep down this rabbit hole. But it's something that I'm just keeping my eyes on because I haven't gone into anything AI related right now, but it's something that I'm just watching to see if there's anything that picks up steam where I can like okay, this is something here. I'm going to go ahead and like, maybe like start a project around that, making sure that I'm like actually, I don't want to just start a project for the sake of chasing money, right? This is going against the whole PHC thing. I want to make sure that it's something that I actually enjoy, or I'll apply it to an industry that I'm passionate about. Like we have 2 French bulldogs. Like maybe I'll like, I don't know, combine that with like, French bulldogs. I don't know, but like, um, but yeah, I mean, so AI is, something around that. And then, I think longevity is definitely going to be a big part of the next decade or two. I think we're reaching a point where, the technology and the science is catching up to like human longevity. I think it's gonna be crazy, but people are gonna live a long time at some point in our lives, and so that's also an area that I'm really passionate and interested in. And I think that's definitely going to be continue to be a popular, or just generally like a hot topic industry. And then I guess I'll put out one more thing, which is we're reaching a point where the nicheification of the internet, I think you can get into any type of like super random thing. The more random and more weird it is, as long as you have distribution for it, I think it can really take off. And I'll give you a couple examples that I came across. Like I saw an account on Instagram where they were like literally just like they go to the beach and then they like arrange these pebbles on the beach, and it's like they make like a beautiful artwork resembling Picasso. And I was like, this is crazy. And like literally, like, can you imagine like 10 years ago, you can't really like, I don't know. I just feel like that kind of stuff wouldn't really catch on. But like now, like that account, it has, hundreds of thousands of followers and get brand deals. They can like build whatever like brand thing. And so like that's attention, and that's like really powerful. And I don't know. I just feel like nowadays you can literally follow any passion and just really work at it for a while, and you can make a living doing that. So I think it's like the long tail nicheification, where the weirder it is, almost like the better it is. The weirder and the more specific and niche it is, it's almost like a reverse effect where that becomes like your advantage. You're the only person in the world that can do this one really random weird thing. And then you just blow up because it's like, wow, this person is crazy.
Yes.
It's like a weird thing, but the more weird and specific and niche, whatever your thing is, like that could actually end up being like the mainstream thing because it's so out there.
Okay, so these are 3 areas I'm pretty excited about as well. This is why the internet is such an awesome invention. There's AI, longevity and health, and niches. There's always that saying that there are riches and niches, and I think that's going to be more and more of a trend. And that's why the internet is such an amazing place. This super long tail, and whatever random interest that you're in, there is going to be a community of people that are also pretty passionate, interested in that as well. They're going to congregate into a community online, and you can either become a creator and share your knowledge and attract that community, or join a community as well. So switching topics, I asked Yong-Soo about his personal operating system. Specifically, I asked him to talk about how he developed his habits. When we last caught up, he was walking me through the habits he was working on for the year. This is a common theme of many people that I've talked to on the podcast. They're focused on the inputs and not being too hard on themselves to really enjoy the journey. This approach might seem really obvious to many of you, but it was not obvious to me at all. So I asked him about his day-to-day process and how he implements it to accomplish all the goals that he sets out for himself.
Yeah. So I have a journal. I don't use that journal for daily journaling. I use it for just organizing my thoughts from time to time. And I visualized, but also just wrote down like how I want to live my life. And so I have like 10 statements. One of them, is like I'm living in a beautiful place where I can host gatherings and things like that. I recite them in the morning and I recite them in the evening. And what I'm trying to do there is like when my mind goes into the subconscious, when goes to sleep, like that's a really powerful state where you want to have these thoughts going. The way I came up with those statements is I organized my life into 3 buckets, which a lot of people probably know, which is health, wealth, relationships. But then I went beyond that because, each bucket is very broad. For example, like wealth, like what does that even mean? Like is that monetary wealth, or is it Is it abundance of time? Like what is wealth, right? So I really dove into like how I think about each one of these and like what an ideal life would be for me. Out of that, basically, I synthesized like, okay, if I want this to happen, then I need to start doing these habits, or I want to at least get on track to make progress on a certain thing. And this could be a random thing. Like one of the things is, I'm surrounded by nature because I think nature is very powerful and it kind of grounds you. And so like one of the things is I want to go for a nature walk daily if I can. If not, then at least once a week, because that helps me like get away from the craziness of the world. It's like, wow, like appreciate nature for what it is. Like crazy, right? Like literally like things just grow and die. And it's like this cyclical regenerative process. And you don't think about it when you're on a computer because it's man-made. So one of those goals for, that nature part was for my health, but it's like a mental health thing. It's not a physical health thing. So there's so many levels to this health, wealth, and relationships pillar that a lot of people talk about, that I feel like is often overlooked. Out of all those, I've created certain things and habits to keep track of. And they're not necessarily like, I want to make sure that I have this specific thing nailed as a habit by the end of the year. Like, not those types of goals. It's guidelines for where I know I want to be. And in order for me to get there, these are the activities that I need to be doing. Because I feel like a lot of these things are so strict. Like you must go to the gym every day. That angle is so strict that if you miss a day, then you're like, what do I do now? It's more of an approach. Like, hey, you want to lose 20 pounds, but you can't lose it by just sitting there. Yeah, I have these reminders like, hey, you should go for a nature walk today because it's, I'm a little bit strong, like high strung right now, whatever it is. And then I also try to create monthly habits where I will try my best to focus on something for 1 month. So I try to hit 12 habits a year. And I feel like that was actually pretty effective for me. One of the habits is like no late night snacking, for example, after 7:30, 8 o'clock, I don't eat any other foods. And so this is the whole like fasting thing, like intermittent fasting. And so I don't eat breakfast, right? And so I don't eat till lunch. And so that cycle really helps clean out my cells and all that stuff. So that was one of my habits that I implemented, and it stuck for a while. Obviously, like when it gets really stressful, I could sometimes break it, but when I'm breaking it, it reminds me I normally don't do this. Whereas if you don't have that, then it's like I just reach for it unconsciously and I just eat it. Like I don't care. So I think it's important to have these things as almost like a check mark for yourself. Like, should I be doing this? Versus like you just automatically do it, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. I want these little tiny things that make it easy for me to do something that I want to do and make it difficult the things that I shouldn't be doing. It's more of an aspirational thing because like there's so many changes happening all the time. You might be traveling, like when you're traveling, your cycle is breaking. So it's not a perfect thing, but it's just more of like having and I review these things, right? So you review these things on a daily, weekly basis, and that keeps you on track. Whereas it's easy to just fall off the track because you don't look at your goals. Like that's why I have these 10 statements that I say to myself every morning and night, because then it just kind of like reinforces it. But it's definitely something that I'm continuously like just doing on a regular basis.
So this is the conversation I had with Yong-Soo about building a personal holding company, which he defines as owning multiple businesses. But unlike traditional businesses with shareholders and investors, the PHC's primary aim is to align with the owner's interests and preferences. I do believe in a lifetime we will see $1 billion solopreneur who has built both an audience and businesses revolved around his or her interests and passion areas. This is a dream scenario for any entrepreneur that is both creative and operational. So I think this is a path that I'm going to take. I'm not really sure what businesses I'm going to own, but I'm pretty excited to go on that journey. If you're interested to follow Yong-Soo, you can visit firstclassfounders.com to listen to his podcast and subscribe to his newsletter. And signing off until the next episode. Until then, adios.